stories about how to use AI at work, stories that help you use AI at work. This week, we're discussing AI in the context of travel. I'm really looking forward to kind of what you found out and where we're going to go with this.
I work in corporate travel as a part-time job. I've been
Okay.
working in corporate travel for a while. So it was interesting to see how some of the bigger companies maybe kind of having that idea to adapt some of the AI tools going on. Not any of the big companies that I found are currently implementing it into their platform, but a couple of them did have some big ideas on where they would like to go with it and not sure exactly how they're going to get there. For example, like Expedia was saying that they're looking at ways that they can one day make the travel booking process a more conversational one, right? Whereas today you have to go on to Expedia, you fill out the forms and you're clicking through multiple web pages. You know, you've got your dates and your preferences, et cetera. And then it's bringing you through all these web pages to then ultimately book the hotel or trip or whatever. So their, future with the generative AI may look like more of a conversation with, I'd like to book this trip and this dates and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you just get that booked. For some specific use cases, it's kind of falling into the like leisure category direct from travelers. How can travelers use ChatGPT as of now to help plan their trip or vacation or something like that? And there was a lot of instances where people were trying it out. There's this one guy, Chris Tuttle was his name, and he thought, well, let's see if it can help me plan a vacation. So he's wanting to plan a vacation from Paris to London. He had already found his flights, so he had some dates, and he prompted ChatGPT act as a travel guide and help me plan my upcoming trip to Europe. I'll arrive in Paris on this date and depart from London on this date. I'm looking to travel with my wife and 7-year-old daughters. So the response that he got was basic and to the point. Here's a sample itinerary for you. Day 1, day 2, day 3, and kind of listed out his bullet points. And then he went on and prompted a lot of follow-up prompts, including stuff like, update your suggestion to include train times, include in this itinerary, or remove Venice, include this, and he just kind of played around with the prompt until he kind of got what he was looking for. Right. And yeah, he ended up with an actually pretty itinerary there. Okay. But once he started to prompt the ChatGPT on travel times and specific suggestions like that, it kind of brings up some of the limitations because, as we know, the database has only been updated, and I believe this is still current. But correct me if I'm wrong, but it's only updated with information up until 2021, and so specifically in this travel prompting, creating an itinerary, that ChatGPT is not going to be able to give you accurate times for train schedule. Not
Yeah.
going to be accurately pricing these activities. I mean, maybe it's still accurate, but as of 2021, we're not sure.
Yeah.
So while it gave him a pretty good itinerary and it probably could have suggested timings that will work, it's not going to give him an exact trip that he could follow. It just doesn't have the capability of that information. It's not real-time information.
So given that it can't do the last mile of actually booking trains and getting the times
Right.
and all, then it's solving the role more of a planning,
Brainstorming activities.
brainstorming activity. That's what I was looking for. So you're kind of saying, okay, this is a location I can go to. What are some fun things? Assuming that a museum hasn't closed down in the last 2 years, here I just have to go to. Okay, so it's kind of like that first stage. Have a conversation with the family. We could do A, B, or C, and then kind of zone in, and then you'd have to book everything for real on your own.
Exactly. Yep. And that's the limitations, like I think that the big companies are having with that until that's updated. They can't really implement that into their booking platform. This next use case that I've found was a guy who was basically testing out almost the same thing or very similar. But
So,
instead of just using the ChatGPT interface, right, he went over to the Bing with ChatGPT, which
yeah.
produced a lot better results. And his point was like, is it really the GPT-4 that was helping me in the scenario, or could I have got the same results on Bing, just Bing.com
Yeah.
or any search engine, right? But I mean, it still does have the conversational feel to it. Back to what Expedia was saying on their vision on where they're going is, they're ultimately going to try to find a way to give customers a more conversational way to interact with Expedia by combining its data, right, the ChatGPT data, with the two types of data that Expedia currently tracks already, which is customer purchase history and the most current pricing and availability of airline tickets, hotel rooms, and rental cars. Essentially, that's what most of the big companies are moving towards.
Something you said earlier was travel agents potentially becoming obsolete. I wasn't aware of corporate of course that has to exist. It's just not something I think about. And you were like, oh, it could be rather than making them obsolete, it's redefining the role.
Right.
Is that something that you have, like, do you know what specifically would they be moving towards?
Well, it did come up, especially like the whole sector of business travel, right? I mean, corporate travel is this $700 billion company or industry, right? It's a very big industry, and there's a lot of technology behind the corporate travel industry. Right? Concur is a company that's one of the biggest out there on online booking tools for corporations. Mainly, what you've got to kind of consider about corporate travel is that most companies outsource their corporate travel, right? If you have people that are traveling within your company and you spend over a certain amount of money, they normally outsource that travel. So then they come up with travel policies, right, to stay within this amount. And, all of the policies are like this long. And then you have all of the rules and regulations to stay within. So specifically how a corporate travel agent could use the generative AI in their workflow are going to come from things like that, deciphering different kinds of travel policies. Because like I said, as a corporate travel agent, you're getting calls from different employees that are traveling all over. And then you're having to decipher through their long list of policy in order to book them within the parameters of what their policy says you can. You don't go over $500 for this flight, et cetera, et cetera. So, I come across somebody that was using ChatGPT to not necessarily form the policies, but you could even, like, when you're onboarding a client, which would be the corporation, not the employees. When you're onboarding the corporation, you could use that to, help them create those policies. And then when you're implementing them, maybe, I don't know, to summarize the policy or to find information within the policy, right? So that you don't have to necessarily, and there's ways to do that within the programs that the agents are already working with. But I mean, in any case, like it was one of the ways that I did come across that. Let's see, this guy from UiPath, it's a travel expense company, was using it, right? And then the other way that I can see it making a big dent and that he was using it also, actually, there's a company that is pretty big in the travel industry that is implementing it currently, is in the form of expenses. So when corporate travelers are traveling, the main thing that they have to do afterwards is expense their travel and try and get reimbursed for it. So this is going to help the traveler more so than the company. However, it's still going to also benefit the company because, it's saving their employees time, right? And that's also good. So one of the prompts this guy used for let's say after you're back from your business trip, he had a canceled flight and he had to claim a complaint for a reimbursement on his canceled flight. Typically, your corporate travel agent could do that for you, but this guy went ahead and just did it himself with ChatGPT. He asked ChatGPT to write him a complaint for reimbursement of his flight, et cetera, et cetera. It shot out a great email that was very detailed, and he didn't even have to think about it. So this was a really great use of it. And then back to what I was telling you about the expense reporting, right? It's something that takes a lot of time for corporate travelers, and neither the corporation or the corporate traveler likes that. So trip actions is kind of, let's say, going out to battle with Concur, who's currently like the leader in the industry for that. And they're using the AI to extract the data from the receipts. Now, whether it's a picture of it or a digital copy of it, or directly from when your trip was planned online in their portal, right? Extracting the data to then automatically create the expense report. So they don't even have to go in and enter all of their
Sure.
savings and information and things like that.
Got
So
it.
I thought that was kind of probably one of the big ways we'll also see the AI come up in
Sure.
the corporate job, at least.
Okay, so there seems to be a couple of use cases that are coagulating for all industries here, where it's writing outreach emails, co-piloting documentation, or, just you were saying, creating these policies, summarizing information. And this seems to come up now in pretty much every industry, where it's like anyone who's doing this kind of work behind the scenes doesn't really need to use it because they can leverage to do it. And that's definitely going to be, or is already happening in the corporate travel space. So we have this larger conversation about like, how do we make booking travel experiences more conversational, which Expedia is figuring out. And it doesn't sound like anyone's figured it out yet. People are still going and booking trains the way that they have for the last 10, 15 years. Like that hasn't fully fundamentally changed yet, but they're trying to figure that out. Whereas travel agents or corporate agents there is still a lot of non-automatable work in signing a company up and doing all of the bespoke things that you need to do to book travel for that company. But in the non-fully automatable reality of having to do that just the way that one company likes, there are a lot of steps that are now automatable, not automatable, but that you can use AI to make it much faster or much more efficient and kind of break down. But you still very much need a human there to supervise what's being done, but it kind of frees them up to, I don't know, much faster or much better, or deciding on how that company wants to use that extra efficiency. And that's nothing that's specific to the travel industry. That's kind of closer to these efficiencies that we're starting to see in all industries now.